Did life begin on comets? I'm going to look at this hypothesis that life on Earth was actually formed on a comet and it was transported through outer space and a comet fell to Earth, and that's how life began on planet Earth. Now I'm going to give you my thoughts on this, but I am going to give you a quick spoiler alert. I think this theory is absolute nonsense, but let's dig into it and see what's happening with this. And the reason I've talked about this is because I've been coming across this quite a lot. I watch space documentaries. This crops up a lot. These documentaries make it seem like a lot of the scientists and astronomers in these shows kind of entertain this idea, but I don't know how widespread this theory is amongst the astronomers. I guess because it's made for TV that these shows are going to highlight more wacky ideas, especially when it comes to life and how life was formed, because these shows really trying to promote the idea that life may exist elsewhere in space, especially on moons of the outer planets, the moons of Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus. Let's talk about this theory. This guy is one of the big proponents of it, Chandra Wickramasinghe from Cardiff University. I'm butchering his last name. This idea is called Panspermia. It's a hypothesis. The idea that comets are infected with primitive life forms and delivered life to the early Earth. Here's the first line that should be a red flag. That would explain why life on Earth arose so quickly after a planet formed 4.5 billion years ago. So apparently life started evolving on Earth pretty quickly after the planet formed. Now this may or may not be true, but let's just say it is true. Why would it have to come from a comet and not from Earth itself? Because after the Earth was formed, it kind of calmed down a bit and it would have been more conducive for life after like the violent formation of the Earth with all these asteroids and rocks coming together. That's how Earth was formed, from billions and billions of asteroids and comets and dust coming together, and then the Earth getting larger and larger, and then gravity pulling in more and more of this matter. That's how the Earth was formed. So technically speaking, Earth did actually form from asteroids and dust and meteors, and then after the Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago, Earth was still bombarded by a lot of these comets and asteroids and so on. So it's like the Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago. It makes it sound like the Earth just formed like really, really quickly and that was it. But it was like a gradual process where the Earth just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can't say at this particular point the Earth was formed and then the day before there was no Earth. It was just this gradual process that happened over probably hundreds of millions of years. There's all sorts of theories related to that, especially with how water got onto the planet. The prevailing theory is that all the water on Earth came from comets. So that's something I may do at a later stage. But for now, we're just going to concentrate on life and these amino acids which have been discovered. So that they found clay on... Scientists reported seeing clay particles spewing out from the interior. So this is where like scientists go wrong a lot of the time. They discover something and then they just add 2 and 2 and get 100. Clay needs liquid water to form. So he's suggesting that comets once had warm liquid interiors due to heating from radioactive isotopes. Clay is also a favorite catalyst for converting simple organic molecules into complex biopolymers on the early Earth. Again, that may be true, may not be. So because they found clay on this comet, this guy thinks that life on Earth began on a comet. Again, it's like there's a few steps missing here that need to be explained. So he's really pushing this. He's been pushing this for years. And this guy, comet expert Michael Mumma, is not impressed. He was arguing about all these comets would have had enough material to start life. And this guy disputes the number because most comets don't go near Earth. But again, maybe like years ago, there were more comets. So even this guy debunking this theory, he's got a flawed argument as well. So he's claiming that there aren't enough comets, but maybe millions of years ago there were. So I don't think, and this is where the scientists just get their arguments sometimes really just don't hold up. He says the existence of clays and comets is controversial because there is no clay in the samples of Comet Wild 2 that NASA returned to Earth. So NASA has already returned samples from this Comet Wild 2 that had no clay. And this is something else that I'm going to get into. Like, comets are not all the same. There are different types of comets made from different materials. Remember this when we look at this article here. Comets may have delivered many life's building blocks to Earth. This one talks about xenon. So it's a noble gas, xenon. It's found on Earth. It's claiming that 20% of xenon in Earth's atmosphere was delivered by comets. How did they come to this conclusion? So they studied this one comet, 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko something or other, and Rosetta gathered during a series of low altitude orbits of comet 67P. Okay, so that's good. They're calling it comet 67P. I don't have to pronounce that again. They discovered isotopes of xenon. You got isotopes, which are variations of elements that contain different numbers of neutrons. So Rosetta's observations revealed that 67P is deficient in heavy xenon. So xenon, there's different isotopes of xenon, and because it doesn't have any heavy xenon, they compare that to the xenon on Earth, and they've come to the conclusion that 22% of the Earth's xenon came from comets. And here's where it gets really interesting, with asteroids providing the remainder. So they claim that all the xenon on Earth comes from either comets or asteroids. And because of the makeup of this one comet, remember, they're basing this on the makeup of xenon on one comet. And they come to this ridiculous conclusion that 22% comes from comets just because of one comet. You see how these guys make up this nonsense based on such poor data? One comet out of like the trillions and trillions of comets, even just in our own solar system, they come up with this figure based on studying, and like they could study another comet and find no xenon, or find xenon that's not deficient in heavy xenon. Again, they're just coming up with this nonsense. Scientists think asteroids deliver the vast majority of the water in Earth's oceans, like I mentioned earlier. And these space rocks have been regarded as the chief suppliers of the planet's other volatiles, such as nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and noble gases. So again, they're claiming that all the noble gases, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, all of this came from comets. Again, nonsense. Models suggest that the Earth was extremely hot shortly after its formation, about 4.5 billion years ago, so it probably lost its primordial volatiles early on. Maybe, maybe not. There's primordial volatiles may have survived. And also, after the Earth was really hot, it probably cooled down pretty quickly. And so life could have developed relatively shortly after the Earth cooled down. And there's life on Earth that survived extreme heat. We've discovered bacteria in volcanoes and places like that where it's extremely hot, and also where it's extremely cold. So life is, you know, us humans, we can't bear temperatures that are like 5 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. You know, anything outside of that range, and humans act like total babies. They can't handle it. They can't handle the cold. They can't handle the heat. But some of these organisms can, you know, they're much more hardy than we are. So this inference is drawn partly from the isotopic similarity of hydrogen, nitrogen, and other materials on Earth to that of certain asteroids known as carbonaceous chondrites, as measured in meteorite samples. They see patterns of the isotopes, the same like percentage makeups in asteroids as they do here on Earth. But again, that doesn't prove that all the hydrogen, nitrogen came from comets. It could have formed here on Earth. It probably formed while the Earth was being created 4.5 billion years ago. There was also a dynamical argument. Jupiter and other giant planets formed early, and the outer solar system from which comets originate was isolated early from the inner solar system by the giant planet's gravitational fields, he said. Now our finding calls for a revision of such models. Okay, so basically what he's saying is that the comets are in the outer solar system, and therefore, in order for their wacky theory to be true, the whole idea that these comets stopped coming towards us pretty early on doesn't hold true. So there's a big problem here, because now we have so few meteors and asteroids hitting the Earth. This has been the case for a very long time. According to models that have been around for years, you had the comet Schumacher-Levy 9 that hit Jupiter back in 1994, I believe, and that was a rare event. That doesn't happen often. And it hit Jupiter because of Jupiter's like huge gravitational pull, and also the fact that Jupiter was formed a long time ago, maybe even before Earth was, and that Jupiter is kind of like a vacuum cleaner, taking in all these comets as well, protecting the inner planets. And so this idea that comets provided life is nonsense. Because what could a new model be for this? They would have to argue that comets are in the inner solar system. It's nonsense. This paragraph kind of destroys the whole theory right here. Comets are especially enriched in noble gases, explaining how their contribution of xenon and perhaps other materials to the earlier. So some of them are enriched with xenon and others are not. They haven't analyzed. They've only looked at a handful of comets. The newly analyzed Rosetta data also indicate that 67P xenon predates the solar system. That is, the comet contains samples of interstellar matter. That's an exciting result. Now, I don't know how they came to this conclusion, how they can prove that. But if it is true, it is kind of cool that this comet may have originated in a different solar system and just drifted into space and became part of our solar system. And again, this green paragraph, it's comparing nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen on Earth to cometary samples and how they want to get more samples, and this will probably happen over the next coming decades. And again, don't be surprised if they discover comets with no xenon or a different isotope makeup of xenon. So panspermia is the term, and sperm, yes, it does contain the word sperm. Sperm is the Greek word for seed. Pan means all, so all seed. Hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe, distributed by space dust, meteoroids, asteroids, comets, planetoids, and even spacecraft. There's different types of panspermia. Apparently it goes back to the 5th century BC from Greek philosopher Anaxagoras. I don't know if this guy is related to Pythagoras of the Pythagoras theorem. So this goes back a long way. Fred Hoyle, another astronomer who had some wacky theories, and Chandra Wickramasinghe. These guys are big proponents of panspermia. There was one here called radio panspermia. The idea that you have tiny particles of like amino acids or whatever, like this size 1.5 micrometers, would be propagated at high speed by radiation pressure of the sun. This theory is pretty wacky and few people believe it. How would these survive the radiation of the sun? So lithopanspermia, this is the one we've been talking about. Meteors, asteroids, the rocks. And this one goes through like possible experiments. Now, this is where I would say that this theory breaks down completely, because you got survival in transit, atmospheric entry to the Earth. So how would these amino acids actually survive the impact of a comet or a meteor? These impacts are just so violent, and the heat generated is just absolutely crazy. The velocity of these impacts. So the idea that these amino acids could survive, and then these amino acids that came from comets were actually what formed life on Earth, and that's where we all come from, I just don't believe it. I believe that these amino acids formed on Earth, and the building blocks of life come from them, and that's how life began, not from the comets. And this guy Thomas Gold believes in what's called accidental panspermia, and he believes that cosmic garbage, that life on Earth might have originated accidentally from a pile of waste products dumped on Earth long ago by extraterrestrial beings. Okay, so this theory is wacko. That some aliens were just passing by Earth in their spaceship, and somebody accidentally pressed the open hatch button for the garbage area, and all this garbage just fell out and landed on Earth, and that's how life formed. Okay then. We have directed panspermia, the idea that aliens deliberately seeded life on Earth. So they passed by Earth and said, oh, look at this planet. This planet looks like it could host life. And they dumped the seeds of life here, and that's how it began. Here's another hypothesis, that extraterrestrial sources of illnesses. So some people speculate that diseases and so on come from outer space, from extraterrestrial origins, including the flu pandemic, polio, mad cow disease, HIV. Look at this. In April 2016, some Chinese guy from the Department of Infectious Disease Control in China presented a statistical study suggesting that extremes of sunspot activity to within plus or minus 1 year may precipitate influenza pandemics. Interesting. So given everything that's been going on with a certain pandemic right now, that this Chinese guy was proposing back in 2016 that sunspots may have caused influenza pandemics. Not an institute of virology in a certain city, but sunspots. Okay. Alright. So there you go, guys. Did life begin on comets? My answer is no. It did not. Life began on Earth from these building blocks, amino acids. That's my theory. So what do you guys think? Do you think we're alien garbage? Do you think that life evolved here on Earth? Do you think we came from a comet? Let us know in the comments. If you like this, hit the like button, subscribe, share the video. Until next time, see you guys later.